when COVID allows us, we have hands-on clinics where people can come bring their horses. We have practice camping, things like that. But also right now, what we're doing this year is a series of seminars, which we're just really excited about. So the Old Dominion's been around. We're approaching our 50th year. I've kind of lost track because we didn't hold it because of COVID last year. So we're approaching our 50th anniversary. Our rides are sanctioned by, and the reason sanctioning is important and the reason you should join these organizations is that when you go to a sanctioned competition, and that's pretty much all we have in the United States, but when you go to a sanctioned competition, you know exactly what you're getting into. You know, you have rules, familiarity, you have consistency, you know, you're not going to be any surprises because everything is run for the safety of the horses, the education of the riders. For instance, the American Endurance Ride Conference provides insurance for rides. It provides record keeping. I mean, I can look at rides that I did back in the 80s, before a lot of you guys were born, but I can look at rides back 40 years ago and look at my records and see what my horses did. And it's pretty darn exciting because they keep your records, however many horses you ride. So they provide mentoring, they provide education. So AERC is a really, really good organization to hook up with. A lot of these rides, a lot of these organizations like SARA, the Southeast Endurance Riders Association, provides incredible awards at the end of the year. I mean, they all do. They all have recognition programs as a rider, which is important. But the SARA provides, you know, they give you awards for number of consistent completions, things like that. But it's very supportive of you, and so it gets you into a group of like-minded people that keep you going, and you can always talk to people. But it's if you get a chance, once you get into this, you really should join. You know, start with AERC, but then join the other ones, because you will be able to always know what you're getting into. When you go to a ride, you can look up the rules, you know exactly what you're doing right or you're doing wrong. You never have to be concerned about what's happening.
Also, they should join the older.
I just wanted to add, what a lot of people don't know is the No Frill Rides in April is actually on the back side of the Old Dominion Trail. So when you ride the No Frills Trail, you're actually riding part of what the 100 milers ride, which is kind of cool.
I was going to add to Lonnie said join ARC, join Old Dominion too.
Truth. So again, the Old Dominion, we've been around since the early 70s. Yes, so we have a reputation. It's partly because our June ride is obviously held in June when it can be pretty hot. Sometimes it's 70 degrees, sometimes it's not 70 degrees, sometimes it's a little warmer. It is indeed a challenging ride, but in many ways it's a very easy ride. Again, since we've been doing this for nearly 50 years, you'll have a lot of support, and what you'll learn in this seminar today, but also when you come to the rides, you'll realize that things are the same year after year. We have the same people who do the ambulance driving. We have the same people who do the drag riding. And so you'll have just a tremendous amount of support. One of our reputations, which is true, is our trails can be in areas rocky. And the reason you need to know this is that you cannot come to this ride barefoot. Number one, we won't allow you to start. But it's just not fair to the horses, is that you may train your horse at home. You may go to rides in the Southeast, which have much more forgiving footing barefoot. But here, it's rocky enough that in fairness to the horse, to give it the best chance of feeling the best it can possibly feel, they need to at least have shoes or have boots that you have practiced with, because it just is, boots are a very difficult topic. And, you know, at some point we should actually just do a seminar on boots and hoof protection, because
yes.
That's a very difficult thing to do. And there's nothing more maddening than having your boot fall off every 5 miles or worse and having to climb off. So most of us are we've either started with steel nail-on shoes and stayed with them, or glue-on shoes and stayed with them. Those of us who do wear boots, we've practiced with them a lot. So I think at some point we should actually do a thing on hoof protection.
I agree, Lonnie, 100%.
Yeah. But so the other thing about the Old Dominion is that back in the dark ages, before you all were born, is endurance rides, we had a lot more space. We had a lot more open territory. We had a lot more people who had a lot of property. And so endurance rides were almost always point to point, which meant that we started at A and then you made a great big circle and you came back and ended back at the place where you started, but you had various vet checks or checkpoints along the trail, and you made a journey, and you sometimes crossed different state lines and you went different places, but you came back to the base camp only at the finish. And then what's happened is that since the world is changing and areas are getting smaller and terrain is getting smaller, is that we have a lot more rides. They keep coming back to base camp for each check. So you'll go out and make a loop, like a 15-mile loop, and come back to base camp and have a vet check. Then you'll go out and make another 20-mile loop and come back to base camp and have a vet check. And so there's not very many rides left in the world of endurance who have a point to point. And it does make for, it's a different kind of ride because you're actually going somewhere. The neat thing about the 100-mile ride is when you get to the 50-mile point, you're at the northernmost point of our trail. If you look at our map, and when you turn south, you know you're going home. You know that the last 50 miles, every step you take is taking you closer to home. So it's very encouraging and there's a good reason to keep going because every step you take takes you closer to home. But so that's a plus for the Old Dominion, and that's also a challenge. That's one of the reasons we're going to talk about today is how to prepare for having all these away holds, having all these checkpoints that are not back at base camp. So you have to say, okay, how am I going to do this? I can't just leave everything in a big pile and keep coming back to it. I have to know how I'm going to get my stuff to where I need it. But so that's what makes the Old Dominion special, and that's what makes us very passionate about keeping it this way, is that every now and then we have this talk about it's just so expensive in terms of manpower, in terms of territory to have a point-to-point trail, but that is who we are and that's who we're always going to be.
Okay, and now we're going to have Terry talk to you about the story of A Tale of Two Riders.
Hi, everybody. What we did here, or Sonia did, I should say, is she has invented two characters for us to help bring as you will relate to
Terry, you're
in some way. Do I not have sound?
You have sound, but you're freezing. You might want to take your video off to help.
Got it. Okay. Try that. Okay. Is this better?
yes.
I hope.
Much better.
Awesome. All right. So we have a rider who is riding an Arabian. She has completed a conditioning program that she is convinced will get her through the Old Dominion. She's experienced with camping. She has tack that she's happy with and has entered the 55-mile event. She has people coming with her who will act as her crew. Now, you can take Mary as a package, or you can say, I identify with this part of this rider and these things I still have questions about. That's okay. Second rider that we have is Emily. She has a draft, so different body typed animal. She's not 100% sure he can do the sport, but she's training at home and she's convinced that this is something they're going to try. She is happy with her tack. That's not a question, but she is coming by herself. So we're going to talk about how both of these riders are going to make it through their day with no drama, no whining, no crying.
Okay, then we're gonna go to the next slide, and we have Diane Connolly talking about it.
Okay, I'm actually the ride manager for this ride. And when riders arrive, and Mary and Emily are arriving at the ride, and this is true at most rides, as you arrive, usually somebody checks you in. Sometimes you can just go and park, but at the Old Dominion, you actually get greeted by somebody. Our Melody, big smiling face, she'll greet you, and then she'll help you find your assigned spot. Kind of unique to the Old Dominion, we actually mark off the different campsites with flags in the field. You'll have a 30 by 70 space for your rig and your horses, and she'll help park you. So once Mary and Emily get assigned their spot and they get parked, the next thing they're going to do is they're going to set up their campsite with some people use high ties, some people use electric fencing, some people actually carry corral panels in their trailer. And if you notice, Mary is going to use an electric pen where Emily's going to use a combination of electric and high tie. I'd say that that horse high ties, but is an escape artist, so she did electric around it in case she gets off the high tie.
This is my draft. Oh, sorry, Diane.
A Houdini gets out of everything. And I've started to see more and more people using either the plastic corral panels or they'll actually carry metal lightweight corral panels, and we'll either just make a round pen out of them or they'll attach them to the side of the trailer. If you'll notice the bottom picture there, Sonia's trailer, she uses the side of her trailer as one of the sides of her corral. I do that also. It enables you to get a little bigger corral with less electric fencing. And for me, I feel a little more secure because I can use the trailer as a block for one way of getting out.
Okay, and now we have the next slide. Lonnie is they are taking their horses to the vet check, and you may meet Lonnie there.
So what's happened is that as Diane said, is you set up your camp, you've gone to registration, and you've gotten your at the bottom picture is a rider card. And that is sort of your little passport that you carry with you. So it will come in your rider packet. Is when you check in at registration, you'll get one of the things you'll get in your packet. So you'll usually get like camp rules, like no fires, keep dogs restrained, things like that. And then you'll in a schedule of events, so you'll know what's happening. And all this will be in your ride packet. So when you get your ride packet, this has nothing to do with vetting, but when you get your ride packet, read the darn thing, take it apart, look at it, flip on both sides of the piece of paper so you know what you're getting into, and then get your rider card, which is this little piece of paper at the bottom here, and fill out the top, because you'll have a number. Your rider number will be on there, and so just for us, for the veterinarians, but also for you, or in case you lose your card, fill out the top, which is going to be like what ride it is, what date it is, what your name is, what your division is, what your horse is, and your rider card will travel with you. So what happens is you fold it up, and you'll also get a little sandwich baggie, a little Ziploc bag. And so your rider card will travel with you throughout the day and all the way to the end. And since the Old Dominion is usually wet one way or another, it's either raining in the spring, which is very beautiful, or in the summer, you pour gallons of water and gallons and gallons of water over your horse. And at some point, your rider card's going to get wet, even in its little Ziploc bag. So ours are made of Tyvek, so they don't just shred into a little piece of soggy Kleenex. But so you do want to carry your rider card everywhere you go. And if you happen to lose it, it's not a big deal. The station heads, the people in charge of every vet check have extras. So it's not like, oh my gosh, you have to go back and find it. But your rider card is sort of your little passport that we keep stamping along the way as you go down the trail. So the purpose of the pre-ride check, the reason you're there is, this is not the police, is we want to check your horse and make sure there's no reason why it shouldn't have the best day ever. We want to make sure that it's sometimes we take a temperature, sometimes you'll take its temperature. We just want to make sure the heart is working right, that all the systems are as good as they can be for your horse to complete the challenge that it has ahead of it. And not every horse looks the same. This horse here, number one, this is how a horse is supposed to trot. She's not choking up on its head. This is one of the things you do at the pre-ride check, and what you'll do the whole day is that you will trot your horse so we can check it for soundness. We can check it for animation, for how it's feeling, its attitude, things like that. And when we say attitude, we're not talking crabbiness, we're talking awareness of the rest of the world. This horse is very aware. It says, oh, look over there, somebody might have food. Oh, look over here. But this is something you need to do at home a lot, and you'll do it for the rest of your life, is practice trotting your horse, because it may trot beautifully at home, and then when it comes to the ride, it will act like a donkey, and you will have to drag it every step of the way, or it will. I mean, they can humiliate you in 1,000 ways and make you look like you've never done this before. But what she's doing here is she's right at the horse's shoulder. She's not ahead of it, dragging it. And her rein is loose, so she's not keeping its head from, she's not restricting its head. And the horse is very happily trotting along next to her as if it's done this a million times, which it probably has. But so what we're trying to do at the pre-ride vet check is just to make sure there's nothing glaring, like we don't find a hot leg that is not just a scrape from banging it in the trailer, but maybe something that's coming up in a tendon or ligament, or we just want to make sure we check your hydration, because some of these horses might have trailered 12 or 15 hours to get to the competition. And if we see something in the pre-ride check that might cause a problem, we'll say, he's a little dehydrated right now, or I watched him pass manure and it's a little dry. We'll give you some ideas as to how to boost them up and get them back into all systems going as fast as possible before the ride starts. So we'll check their pulse and respiration again, just to listen to the heart, make sure there's no abnormalities, listen to the gut sounds, palpate their muscles. We're checking their back. And again, we're not looking for problems. We're not saying, aha, I see a weakness here. What we really want to know is there anything that we see that you need to know to keep an eye out for during the ride, or that we need to know to keep an eye out for? Because again, it says wounds and blemishes. I mean, if somebody else has bitten your horse on the neck and it's got this big cantaloupe size, as long as it doesn't bother the horse, it doesn't bother us. If it's under the saddle, that bothers us. If it's under the bridle, then we'll say, okay, we need to change the tack here a little bit. So we're going to do whatever you can to get the horse to the start line in as good a shape as possible and get them through the ride. And if we can help you in any way, we'll make suggestions about food or how to house it or whatever to get it through the ride in as good a shape as possible. Another thing that I don't know, that Terry will talk about later, is, so anyway, practice your trotting. And what John Crandall, who's one of our legends in the area, who has ridden 1 million rides, is even though he's ridden thousands of horses on thousands of miles, he still trots his horse out every time he comes back from a training ride. And before he puts his horse away, he makes it jog in hand down the driveway and back again. And so the horse always knows that this is not an option. When I start running, you must run next to me. And you'll just get a better evaluation. Your horse will look better. It will, and it's not that I'm going to grade you on how well you trot, but your horse, if it's sprightly and trots right next to you, rather than one that's being dragging along behind, it's just going to get a better evaluation. So practice all the time. And if you have to practice with a friend to encourage the horse from the rear until it gets the system. Once they get the system, they're fine, but they just love to jerk your chain. They love to say, oh, not today. But so do practice trotting the horse, and also learn how to use a stethoscope, because they make all kinds of fancy heart rate monitors and electronic things, but a stethoscope is so fast, and you're going to want to listen to their gut sounds and listen to their heart rate. And if you bring it to the ride, and if you ask any kind of management or anybody who is in a position of making the ride go smoothly, we will show you how to do it, and we will drag you from horse to horse until you get it. And once you get it, you got it totally. I mean, it's really easy once someone shows you how to do it. So you can go to Walgreens, or you can go to any distance depot or anywhere and buy a $5 stethoscope or a $20 stethoscope and carry that puppy around with you. And if you need to learn how to do it, bring it to the ride and bring it to the Pulse people, or bring it to any Old Dominion management or anything, and we will show you how to use it, and you will use it again for the rest of your life.
Okay, so they went to the vet check, and now they need to set up their crew areas, and this is Terry is going to talk about this.
Okay, so we mentioned that your checkpoints, your vet checks, are at various places along the trail route. So not everything happens back at base camp. The first stop on both the limited distance and the 55-mile ride at the Old Dominion is a place called Bird Haven. And you're going to hear people talk about all these different places: Bird Haven, Laurel Run. The people in the 100 are going to talk about Big 92. These are sort of iconic names in the Old Dominion community. And as you stick around, you'll begin to learn them. The big two for this upcoming event are Bird Haven and Laurel Run. Bird Haven is fairly close, as the crow flies, to the base camp. So the night before the ride, whether it's you or your your squad that comes with you, you will want to take a few essential items over to Birdhaven so that they are waiting for you when you come off of that first loop of trail. What you'll want to do is look for your spot. So there is an art to finding your crew area, and seasoned riders, seasoned crew members always have preferences, and you can see them. They either like to be close to the in timer, or close to the out timer, or close to the vetting lanes. So everybody's got their little strategy. And as with everything in the horse community, ask 10 people and you'll get 25 answers as to what's the best way to do it. You kind of have to decide what works for you. Do you want to be able to stop at your spot immediately when you come in? Or do you want to walk a few extra feet to your spot and be able to be conveniently placed to the vetting lanes? As you do this, you will figure it out. But sometimes you have no choice. By the time you've gotten there, all the spots are taken and you get to plunk yourself wherever is left over. What I like personally is I like to have shade, because very often in these summer rides, it's hot. So if my crew is hanging around waiting, I'd like for them to be at least comfortable while we're waiting. And it's also nice for your horse while they're hanging out to have some shade as well. Proximity to the water supply is something the crew looks for, because they don't want to tote water any further than they have to. If there is grass anywhere in the area, that's always nice to be nearby. But I mean, that's the Shangri-La of crewing areas, to have all of those things right at your fingertips. Sometimes you just have to pick what's most important to you out of that spot. The things that you really need to have at a vet check are very limited, actually. You need food for you and the horse. You need something to contain water. It doesn't have to be fancy matching colored buckets. I love Sonia's picture at the bottom with all of her pink and green matching things. I happen to be a little crazy in the matching color department myself, but you can do just as well with random mix match buckets. As long as they hold water, your horse doesn't care if it's drinking out of color-coded things. You do need to have sponges to get that water on. You'll see some people that use cut up milk containers or whatever that have a little handle on them, and they've made a scoop out of it. But whatever it takes to get the water on your horse is what you need to have with you. Electrolytes, I'm going to stop my description there because Lanny's going to talk about those a little more later. You really should have some sort of a fleece or a blanket. Now, yes, we've been talking about how god-awful hot it is in June at the Old Dominion. However, in the early morning in the mountains, it's sometimes cool. So having that fleece is better than not having. If you do not have something and your horse gets a chill, you have done yourself and your horse a service. So better to schlep the extra stuff than not have it at all. I always have some sort of first aid kit, basic stuff, both for me and for the horse. One of the big commodities in a crew area is Desitin. Desitin is the cure-all for everything. You can put it on yourself, you can put it on your horse, any nick, scratch, rub. If it's, things are getting stuck together, put some on it and it'll fix it right away. So we always have that in our kit. We always have
Uh-oh. Is Terry still there?
back yet. You guys have me again? It looked like it
Yes.
That's what happens when you live in the hinterlands. A hoof pick is a definite on this ride. I actually have one in my saddle at all times on any Old Dominion ride. There's rocks, people. And the rule of thumb is that there's always one out there that has your name on it. It's just a matter of whether you're going to find it or not. So having that out there with you is very, very helpful. There are things that are nice to have, such as chairs. If you are bringing people, you get them a cart, they will appreciate it. And it's that because you have to park in one place and crew in another. So having to move all of your belongings from one place to the other is so much easier with something with wheels on it. A pop-up tent is lovely, and you'll see many, many people have them just to keep the shade intact. A saddle rack for when you remove your saddle. It's just as easy to put it on the ground. So this is not a shopping list. This is a for future reference. Have ring will clip and turn into a lead rope. A lead rope is kind of a piece. Monitor or stethoscope, one or the other, fine, but you should try to have some kind of method to check your own pulse rather than having to always rely on others. If you have them, extra parts for the saddle, just in case something snaps or breaks or falls off or gets twisted or things that happen. And easily. One of those little pump garden sprayers is a super nice thing to have. You pump it a few times, you click a button, and it sprays water all over the horse. Some horses love them. Some horses are really not. So you bring it up area. You play with at home first. Mary is doing the 55, remember, she's our 55-mile rider. She also is going to need to pack the night before the ride anything that she's going to want to have at Laurel Run. The crew is not going to be able to go there. Your crew has to remain at Birdhaven, even though the 55-mile trail goes to Laurel Run and comes back to Birdhaven. Your crew can only see you at Birdhaven. So Diane will tell you a little more about that. You also need to set up something for yourself at the finish line, because you will come back to that base camp and that is where you will finish. So both the LD riders and the 55-mile riders need to have something at the finish line. This list has pretty much all the same things that we had for the Birdhaven stop. Usually the 55s or the LDs are going to be finishing in the heat of the day. So that fleece becomes a little less imperative at the finish of this ride. The water buckets are huge. I personally do not put food at the finish of this ride. And I say that because my main goal at the finish is cooling the horse. They get their snack when they get back to their trailer. So that's just my own habits. If you are riding the heavy body, not overly fit or older that doesn't cool down quickly, this is a good opportunity to get bags of ice and pop them into your water buckets so that that water is nice and cool. I ride Arabs. They don't care for ice water. So again, practice before you stick a sponge of ice water up in your horse's groin and send it from here to the moon. Make sure they like it. It doesn't always feel so good. So practice, practice.
Okay, so we finished now we're gonna have Diane talking about the rider meeting. If you get the opportunity to go to the rider meeting, go to the rider meeting.
Okay, and I'm going to just add a little bit to Terry's crewing, just to differentiate. We're talking that this is a point-to-point ride. If you have not been to an endurance ride, a lot of rides, your crew and your finish line are all in base camp. So then you would only be setting up one crew area. If you listen to, as Terry was talking, you're needing to actually bring more buckets and things to the Old Dominion because you're going to need them at Birdhaven. And then you're also going to need them at the finish line. And if you don't have crew, you're going to have double the amount of buckets to set up your little cooling area at the finish line. Terry was also talking about that sprayer. For someone who competed in Morgan for 13 years, the sprayers are incredibly helpful for a non-Arab because you can actually put the ice into the sprayer and then add the water, and you're not ending out with a mud puddle trying to get your horse cooled off because it's much more efficient spraying that. But again, as Terry said, you've got to practice at home. Try it for the first time at a ride and you could have a horse running through camp because they weren't expecting it. So now, as ride manager, I will say it's very important that you come to the ride briefing. With the age of COVID, you will actually get in your ride packet the actual ride briefing notes, which is very helpful, especially if you've never done an endurance ride before, to actually read them before you come to the ride briefing. Because at your first or second endurance ride, the ride briefing can be very overwhelming because we go over so much information. I try to keep it very succinct, but some of the things that we will go over is the start time. At all endurance rides, this is true at any endurance ride, you actually check in with the head timer 15 minutes before the ride starts. At the ride, we will go over all the trail markings, the color of the loops. I personally usually bring a marker, and as the ride manager says what the color of the loops are going to be, like for the Old Dominion, it is going to be pink and black checkered, and we're going to go over the actual trail loops later, but I actually write it on my arm. I either write it on my forearm, I write the color and the distance, or I bring my ride card up to the ride briefing with me, and I will actually put the mileage and then the color of the loop on my ride card or on my arm. I like it on my arm because I can just go like that and it tells me what the next loop color is and how far it is. The other things that we actually go over, and it's kind of mentioned here on this slide, is how we mark trail. And this is pretty uniformed for almost all rides. Your markings are, at least at the Old Dominion, will always be on the right-hand side. So if the first loop is pink and black checkered, you're going to be following those ribbons on the right. Prior to a turn, you will see at least 1 to 2 sets. As you see hanging, I keep pointing, I forget, you can't tell I'm pointing. The ribbon showing right there, there'll be the ribbon, the color of the loop you're on, and then there will be 2 red ribbons warning you you're coming up on a turn. If it is a left-hand turn, that is the only time you will see ribbons on the left. About 50 feet before the turn, maybe 100 feet before the turn, you'll start seeing a few ribbons on the left, warning you that it's going to be a left-hand turn coming up. And then right after you go around the turn, you will have confidence markers. So if you think you're supposed to be making a right-hand turn and you turn right and you do not see ribbons on the right, then look around because it was supposed to be a left-hand turn. The other with our trail markings is a lot of times for the turns, we have pie plates. And if you are coming to do this ride, we have one intersection that basically you come through it 4 times. And that's why we've now changed our ribbon colors to be different for each color loop, which I'm going to go over on a later slide. But at that intersection, there'll be a wrong way arrow, a wrong way pie plate, or a laminated card, so that you don't end out going straight and going into Birdhaven and missing almost half of the loop. There'll be a 55 and a 25 with an arrow pointing left to make sure you turn and head up the hill. So besides ribbons, there will be signs. Some will be wrong way, some will be arrows, and some will actually have the distances on them with the arrow going left or right or straight ahead. After I get done talking about all the trails and housekeeping in camp, then the head vet will get up, and the head vet will talk about the actual vetting. He'll go over what the pulse parameters are. That means what your horse's pulse has to be down to, which is usually 64. And he will go over whether you can leave tack on. Usually at this ride, that's not an option because it's so hot that we want to get the tack off and get the horses cooled. They'll talk about BC. They'll talk about, when to present if you're going to stand for BC. And then I go over the actual rider schedule of events to let you know when our award ceremony is going to be and all of that, the night after the ride. It sometimes can be very lengthy, especially at our June ride, because there is so much to go over. One of the big things I go over at the ride briefing is about Laurel Run. So this one rider in our story is doing the 55. Both at our April ride and this ride, we have one hold that no crew can go to because it's so remote and there's not enough room for parking for crew vehicles. So at that hold, we, the ride management, provide pretty much everything for you and the horse. The only thing you really need to send there is maybe your electrolytes, maybe a sweat sheet. If you are vegan or something, or your horse is very picky about what they eat, maybe a little bag of grain, because at Laurel Run, we provide grain. We provide 2 different kinds of grain. We provide as much wet beet pulp as you want. We provide second cutting orchard, which is actually already in my garage to make sure we got that second cutting. All of that's donated. We provide all the water. We provide all the buckets you need. The only thing you need to bring is a sponge. And in this ride is so hot, you should make sure you carry that sponge on your saddle. We don't provide sponges, but we provide probably 40 5-gallon buckets. We have crew there to help you crew. They bring the water to you. They bring the grain to you. They hold your horse while you sponge your horse off. And then once you get through your pulse and your vetting and your trot out, we actually have a food tent. And because of COVID, it is a self-serve. We provide granola. We have enough water for every rider to have 4 bottles of water, 2 bottles of Gatorade. So that means you can drink 2 in the hold and then put 2 on your saddle to go back to Birdhaven. So we provide sandwiches. We provide PB&J sandwiches, snacks of all kinds, water, Gatorade for humans. So you really only need, if you are coming to this ride and doing the 55 and you've never done the OD, the only thing you really need to send to Laurel Run is your personal items, your electrolytes, if you're not going to carry them on your saddle. Actually, if it's going to be super hot, we do allow people to go out the night before to Laurel Run and leave small coolers of ice in the tree line so that you have it. We do bring, I think 3 coolers of probably 21 bags of ice. Those are for emergencies where riders are having difficulty getting their horse's pulse down, but we will actually have it there. And if we see someone having difficulty getting their horse's pulse down and they're not getting up to the pulse box, we'll get the ice and we'll put it in buckets and help you get your pulse down. But I go over all of that in the ride briefing.
Okay, after the ride briefing, then you have to go back to your trailer, and a lot of the riders will prepare their electrolytes, and that is a mystery in itself to me still. So Lonnie is going to talk to us all about electrolytes.
Okay, so I do want to go back again to what Terry was talking about, is we keep talking about cooling. And again, to those of us who've been doing this since before y'all were born, cooling is just a natural thing. But the deal is that horses have a lot of heavy muscles and all the horses are different. So this little bay horse upper picture is a fairly new horse and he has a lot of surface area to body mass. So he's going to cool very easily. A bigger, heavier horse or darker horses, things like that. So the idea is that when a horse is working, depending on the outside temperature, depending on the horse's speed, depending on the humidity, depending on the terrain, it's going to generate a lot of heat. But not always. So don't always think that for the rest of your life, the first thing you're going to do is douse your horse with water. Because if you're riding up at the Chesapeake right in the spring and it's 48 degrees and your horse is moving at a nice, easy 6 miles an hour, when you come in, if you put water on them, it's going to not go well. It's not going to go well. So cooling is an art that you can only get good at with practice, and it's going to change. Again, it's going to change with the weather. It's going to, if it's 90% humidity versus, and it's got to do with how you cool, because we've learned this in elementary school or whatever it is you cool by convection or you cool by conduction, or it doesn't matter. It's your horse is hot. Your horse is hot. And as Diane said, is if you're in June and you have a saddle on, and you don't just have a saddle on, you have a large saddle pad because it's big enough to go under your pads and things like that. That's like wearing a winter coat. I mean, so even though it's a total pain in the patootie, is if you get to normal horses, if you bring them in sort of hot and you try to cool them with the saddle on, it's like trying to cool off with a jacket on. It's just easier. If you yank the saddle off, your horse is going to cool off so much faster. So the idea is that the horse is going down the trail and its muscles are contracting. And when they're contracting, when they're producing energy, they're producing a lot of heat, which is sort of a waste effort of energy. And so if you come into Bird Haven, if you come into the first vet check, and again, the 100 milers might leave at 5:30 and the 50 milers might leave at 6:30. So you might be coming into Bird Haven at 8:30 in the morning. Well, the humidity might be high enough that your horse is not cooling well, but it's a long downhill to come into Bird Haven. So in fact, you might come in and your horse, and you step off your horse and you put your hand on his neck and you say, not burning up. I mean, you can tell with your hand, is you just say, I feel my horse, I feel he's generating a lot of heat. He's sweating, he's panting, he's doing whatever, or you feel your horse and he's like, feels pretty cool. So you will learn. So cooling doesn't always mean douse your horse with water. It means assess your horse, see if it's hot. And the reason we're cooling is that the horse's pulse, again, a horse, when it's standing there out in the field, its horse's pulse will roughly be around 40 beats per minute. And that's a nice resting pulse. And then once they start walking, they might be walking at, say, 60 to 70 beats per minute. Once they start trotting, they might be trotting at, depending on if they're going up a hill, if they're on the flat, they might be trotting at 110 beats per minute. If they're going up a hill, they might be at 140 to 200 beats per minute. And the whole point is, the way you evaluate your horse's conditioning and readiness to move on and ability to handle the demands you're putting on it is how fast does its pulse come down. Because if you ride your horse and you get off it and its pulse is 80 and it stays at 80, it's not recovering well. No amount of water is going to correct the fact that your horse needs more time to condition. But if you get off your horse and its pulse is 80 and by the time you loosen your girth or take your tack off and your pulse is 50, you say, wait, I didn't even get the water on the horse. But that means you're doing well. Your horse is conditioned, it's handling it, because the horse is trying to push, its heart is beating in order to pump blood out to the muscles to get the circulation out to the muscles so it can cool the horse. The muscles are these huge volumes, these huge heat sinks, and the way the muscles cool is, number one, they evaporate with the sweat on them. They dissipate heat just by blowing heat off the top, but also the blood that runs through the muscles carries the heat back to the rest of the horse to cool it off. And so you need to figure out what your horse is doing at the time, because Terry was talking about a sponge and Diane is talking about a sprayer. And all those things are ways to get water on a horse, but sometimes horses don't need water. Sometimes if you'll be standing back and watch a horse and the horse comes in and people automatically, because they've got their color-corded buckets sitting up, they've got buckets here and they've got 7 people with buckets ready to go, and they start sloshing the horse's water, and the horse is like, oh my God, I mean, I don't need this, go. And it will actually make their heart rate go up because they were cool, they were calm, they were handling everything, and all of a sudden they're being deluged by a typhoon, and they don't know what to do with it. So you need to know your horse and find out, is it hot? Does it just need to be cleaned up a little? Because, even if they come in cool, sometimes you want to just use a sponge, and it's not a sopping wet sponge. You might take your sponge, wring it out a little bit, and run it down its neck and all the areas where people are going to be putting their hands, so it's not sticky and tacky and the horse feels better. If you're riding one of the bigger horses, You know, whether it's a half draft or whether it's a quarter horse or whether it's a Morgan or whatever it is, they have just a lot more muscle to cool off. And so you're going to use a lot more water. And so that's why a lot of us, you do carry, what Diane was saying is you carry a sponge. You really, really need to carry a sponge on the trail with you and train your horse to do that. The horses do not automatically think that's a good idea, but you train your horse to carry a sponge on the trail with you. So when you cross a creek, cross a river, come to a water tank, whatever, you can sponge them down. And that really helps with sort of cooling consistently along during the way. But when you come in with these heavily muscled horses, it's not going to help you to dip a sponge in the water and dab it on the horse. You need to soak them, because it's the same thing as if you're hot, you come in, it's July and you're beet red and you've been working out in the garden and you're kind of vibrating because you're so hot, is if you take your hands and you stick them in a bucket of cold water, the fact that you've put your wrists where all that circulation is in the cold water, it cools your whole body instantly. And all of a sudden now you don't want to throw up anymore and you don't feel like you're vibrating. And it's the same thing with horses is we want to cool them down in order to get their pulse down, which allows them to relax and rest and recover. Because if they're still hot and their heart is beating fast, they can't relax and rest and recover and prepare to go out on the next loop. So what we do is I tend to ride bigger horses, so a sponge is fine. If you have a sponge, again, you'll find there are all kinds of different kinds of sponges. Some sponges do not absorb water well, and you pick it up and it's like kind of using a marshmallow. I mean, there's not much water in the sponge and there's not much water going on the horse. And so oftentimes what we do with crewing is we use various different kinds of buckets, like the kind of bucket chocolate chip cookie mix comes in or something, or she was saying like a little laundry scoop or anything, because instead of sponging the horses, you can throw it on the horse. And it, of course, depends on water availability in camp and whether you're already in Lake Bird Haven, whether you're already in a swamp, because there's so much water there. But you'll learn with your horse how much water it needs at any point. And again, don't always assume you need to throw water on your horse. Just if you feel your horse and it's hot and its pulse is kind of tickling around and hanging at 70, yes, it needs water. If your horse is down at 40, do not pour water all over it. I mean, it won't make it happy. It's just sponge off the areas that it needs to get the salt off, but just go on to the pulse and go on to the vet check. So going down then to electrolytes and backing up a little bit. So what she was talking about with the ice is the reason you may, as your career progresses, the reason we use ice is because it's hot out there. And so there's a tank of water, and usually we pump the water out of local creeks and things like that and fill the tanks with them. But if that was done the night before and it's 92 degrees, the water is now 92 degrees if it sits there overnight. And so it's a lot easier to cool a horse with 50-degree water than it is with 92-degree water. And so as your career evolves, you're not going to do this on your first ride. You're not going to do this on your second ride. But what you'll find is that you have a lot more success if you keep 10 bags of ice in the cooler and don't put them in the water till you're ready, because if you put them in that 92-degree water, it's going to melt and be gone. And your horse is still out there on the trail. So once you see your horse coming in, you'll know you need to dump the ice into your buckets of water. So now your water is cool. So you'll use 1/10 of the water if you use cold water instead of hot water to cool the horse. Hello, duh. But it's those kind of things that you'll watch people. You're like, why are you talking about ice? Why are you talking about cooling? The point is you're trying to get their temperature down so they can relax and rest and recover. And sometimes it takes ice, so it's not ice directly on the horse, it's ice in the water, but you just have to figure that out as time goes by. So there's no one right way. You just have to practice. So with electrolytes, and we've all become familiar with electrolytes with Gatorade and with all the different sports drinks and things like that, so electrolytes are essentially minerals that your body needs. And the most common ones that we're dealing with is sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, and they all come with chloride. Is that your body needs electrolytes. It's in the blood and it's in the muscles they maintain normal function. You have sort of a normal electrolyte balance in your body. So your circulation is right, your nervous system is right, your muscle function is right. If your electrolytes get out of whack, and what happens is this happens by sweating, it doesn't happen really by any other methods, but the horse is out there sweating. And you know how when you sweat, you've got salt on your brow or salt here, well, you're losing sodium chloride, and the horses can lose humongous amounts when they're sweating. So it is true. There are some horses who can compete their entire careers and never need electrolytes. I mean, we've all heard of that, or we've all done that, but that's very rare. Is most horses need some form of electrolytes, and they come in. There's no one right answer. You can email us privately and find out, say, what do you use? What have you used? And you'll find that all of us have changed it many times in our career. As I might use one electrolyte exclusively for 10 years, and then all of a sudden I'm doing something different, and I'm trying something different for whatever reason. And you can get electrolyte that, the cheapest form is an electrolyte powder, which you can, sometimes horses will just eat it straight in the feed and life is good. Or you mix it with water or applesauce or yogurt or anything, which is what they're doing, is they've mixed it in a syringe to make it a little bit stickier, a little bit soupier, and squirt it in the horse's mouth. Horses don't love this, but it is critical for their normal function, for their preventing muscle cramps, because if they get low on calcium, then their muscles can't function normally. So then their guts, because your entire gastrointestinal system is one muscle that keeps scrunching along. And if you're low on calcium, your guts are not going to work. Then you will not have normal gut motility. Then you will be colicky, and then you can't go anymore because you have cramps. You have muscle cramps or gut cramps, things like that. It can make, being short on electrolytes can make you look neurologic. It can make you terribly fatigued. Just exhausted if you just don't have the right electrolytes to keep going. So again, this is something you'll just tweak as you go along. And the standard thing, what most people do is so again, you can either get the powder, you can have, a lot of us use pre-filled syringes, which cost more, but they're a lot easier because whatever, you just don't have to deal with them. And so most people, the standard way to do it is to give 1 dose of electrolyte, which is either like an ounce or 2 ounces or whatever works for you. And an ounce is usually what, if any of you are old enough to remember this, the size of a film canister. We always use that when we started this out, is like the size that the 35 millimeter film used to come in, that's about an ounce of electrolytes. Most of you now have no idea what 35 millimeter film is, but anyway, so a film canister is about an ounce of electrolytes, and you can either put it in your food or you can mix it up with applesauce and squirt it in their mouth. And so most people will preload the night before, and then they'll get a dose in the morning before they go, and then you'll get a dose either at every vet check. And you don't want to give it to them when you first come into the vet check, because then you've just loaded this big pile of salt in their mouth, and they don't want to eat and drink. And then your whole rest period is taken up by begging and pleading with them to eat and drink. So it's a lot easier if you do it just before you go back out on the trail, after they've tanked up and they're full and they're sloshing around. So again, we'll usually give them electrolytes the night before, 1 dose the morning before the ride, 1 dose at every vet check. And then after the ride, because it's the same way for you, is that if you feel achy and weak and things after a ride, if you just sit there and lie on the ground, you're not going to get much better. Or if you just drink a lot of water, that's fine. But if you drink any kind of balanced electrolyte solution to replace all the ones you've lost, you'll feel so much better, so much faster. And then again, this is something that you'll tweak as you go along with your particular horse. So some people, I would say everybody gets used to carrying electrolytes on the trail with them as they go. And sometimes if you're on a particularly long loop, you'll say, oop, it's been 2 hours, or I've been 10 miles. I'm going to stop and give them electrolytes. And there's all sorts of things that people say, well, you can't give him electrolytes if he hasn't drunk water. You just have to practice. You just have to do this. And there's no one right way. If somebody says there's only one way to do it, then they're probably missing out on a lot of things. So, and again, feel free to email any of us on this webinar or at the Old Dominion and say, what do you do? What works for you? Because sometimes what you've done for years all of a sudden doesn't work anymore. Sometimes your horse will have problems and you'll say, I did exactly what I've always done. So you just got to be open-minded, keep changing, keep playing with it. Sometimes you got to give more. It doesn't matter if you can't actually give too much, because they just pee it out, or they spit it out, or they spit it all over you. But you can definitely give too little. So this is something that, again, what we've got on this page right here is sort of a good base to start with, and then you'll tweak it as you go along. Because sometimes there's one train of thought that says, if you load them up for, like, if the ride's on Saturday, if you load them up with electrolytes on Thursday, you feed them 20 ounces of electrolytes on Thursday and some on Friday, then they've got a huge reservoir in their gut where the fiber is and the water is, and then you don't have to give electrolytes out on the trail. Some people do that, some people don't do that, and there's just a billion ways to do it. But you do need to practice, and this will be something that you'll be messing with again, like trotting, for the rest of your life, because every time you change horses, they will not think that electrolytes are a good idea, and you will spend a lot of time backing up, begging, pleading, contemplating, jerking on their head, and not having no effect. And so it's just something you have to practice with a lot, and there's no easy way to do it, but just do it.
I'd like to add a little bit right there, especially if it's a new horse. Practice with just applesauce at home. They start liking the flavor of the applesauce, and then when you have the electrolytes in it at the ride, at least the first one, they'll take it.
Okay, so now we have electrolytes. So now we're going to go more into the art of crewing, and Terry's going to talk to us about this.
Okay. What is crew? It is not a mandatory thing that you have people to help you at a ride, but it sure makes the day go a lot more quickly when you have people to share your adventure with and to laugh at your mishaps and to just sort of cheer you on as you're going through this mad adventure that we call endurance riding. Anyone who knows me or wants to get to know me, just look for the crowd of people. I tend to travel with a pack. I have some kids that I do mentoring with, and their parents are a marvelous support system. And so we always have a large group of folks, and we laugh. I've never laughed so hard. But you are welcome. If you are a particular kind of person and you like to do things just so, by all means, you can do this on your own. If you are coming to the Old Dominion and you do not have anybody that's traveling with you, but you are interested in having a little bit of support, there is nothing wrong with reaching out as you see people setting their stuff up in Birdhaven and say, hey, would you mind if when I come in, can you help me? These people sit around all day long looking for stuff to do. As a general rule, anybody that signs up to crew likes to be doing things. And so they'd much rather be helping more horses and more people than sitting around watching you trip over your own buckets. So never be afraid to ask.
Terry, let me interject. At Birdhaven, we actually will have 4 or 5 volunteers that are literally there to help crewless riders. I didn't say clueless, I said crewless.
Yay. Sometimes the clueless and the crewless are all one and the same. So what is the point of a crew? It's to help get you and your horse through your day successfully, happily, you know, and without drama. They are there to get you in and out of that vet check in as much order as possible, and with as much organization as possible. If you decide to do this sport, you need to notch up your level of organization, whether you're on your own or whether you are with others. You need to have a plan. I am an organizer by trade and have a tendency to label things and color code things so that there's no question where items are and in what order we will use them. So I usually have everything lined up, labeled, and ready. So whether it's me going through it to find what I need or whether it's my people, everything is clearly marked. That's really important, especially as your day goes on, because you will tend to grab things and toss them in a pile. So if you organize them at least at the start of the ride, it's much better for your brain cells. So what does your crew do? While you're out on trail, they are there to prepare meals for you. So beet pulp is a thing. Everybody pretty much universally at a ride tends to offer their horse beet pulp. Well, that beet pulp needs to be soaked. So the morning before when you're out on trail on that first loop at Birdhaven, they're soaking your beet pulp, they're fixing a bucket, or they're cutting up apples or chopping up carrots or whatever. If you're on your own, remember the night before, you're probably going to need to go ahead and get that beet pulp soaking so that it's ready for you when you come in. The crew will fill your water buckets for you. And we work very much to a plan. We will set up some idea of how we're going to travel that particular day. We're either on a young horse that we're training, we're doing our first ride of the season, so we're going to take our time, or we're on our perfectly fit horse. We're going to let the horse do whatever it wants to do just to see what gas is in the tank. But our crew has some idea of how long we plan to be out on that loop. So if you've said, I'm going to take 2 hours to do the first loop, and it's now 3.5 hours, now they know either something's going on, something's not happening correctly, or you are just lost out in the universe. So they can send up the flares. But letting them know what the plan is helps them to be aware of when to expect you to come. They can take care of pre-mixing any of the electrolyte stuff that we talked about. They can, if there's a lunch or something, a snack that you like to have, they can prepare that for you. And then, crewing is a lot of hurry up and wait. They do all this stuff and they get it all ready, and then they sit and they wait for you. And they wait very patiently for you most of the time. Which is why offering to help other riders is not usually a concern for those that are crewing. They love to offer their assistance. Sometimes they'll also be able to kind of check in with the timer and see, what place you're in, or whether you want to know or not. The crew always wants to know, how are you doing? Where are you finishing? What do you look like? Socializing is a huge part of crewing. There's a lot of chatter that goes on, a lot of sharing of news and events and gossip, and then you can get all that as a rider when you come in off of your loop. It is really important, if you have people helping you, to decide what their talents are and offer them appropriate jobs for their talents. If your spouse or life partner comes along with you and you want them to remain your spouse or life partner, and they are not a horse person, the last thing you should do is hand them your horse to deal with while you sit and do other things. You want to choose skill appropriate assignments for anyone that comes with you. So perhaps the better job for the non-horsey friend who wants to share your experience with you, let them make you a sandwich while you do all of the horse things. They can put feed in a horse bucket, but they may not be comfortable actually feeding it to the horse. Now, if you have horse savvy people, decide what's comfortable for you and what you're happy with them doing. We all know we are crazy horse people. We have a certain way that we like each thing done. If there is something that you like done a certain way, but you're willing to share the task with someone else, explain to them how you like it done. That way, when they pick up that item and start their job, you don't lose a gasket by watching them do it a different way. I am crazy enough. I need to put my saddle on my horse. So everybody on my team knows before we go out on trail, they can do all of the other things that need to get done. But when it comes time to tack up, get out of the way. Crazy lady's on board, and she is going to take care of putting the tack on the horse. It's just my way. They all know it. So they step out, but I had to let them know that because they're trying to be so helpful. They want to do things. They want to make it easy for you. So you need to let them know where the boundaries are. You may do this, this, and this, but not this, this, and this. So as long as you share those details. Once you come in, there's sort of an order that needs to happen in order to have a successful vet time or a successful hold. Let me put it that way. This is your break. This is your time to rest, relax, get yourself and your horse through that vetting area, and then recharge so that you have energy to get back out on trail. The first thing that happens when you come into a hold, there is a timer, an in timer that's right there waiting for you, usually a happy face, greeting you, saying hello, asking how your day is going. You've got to have your vet card out of your pack, out of your pocket, out of, in times of COVID, putting it in your bra is really not socially acceptable right now. So we want to avoid that. So pull it out of, whatever pack you have, and you'll hand that card over to the timer. The timer is then going to need to have a moment to put your in time on that card. Remember that they are also keeping records for the ride management. They're keeping records that, are going in multiple places. So it does take them just a moment to get your card back to you. Again, this is one of those jobs where if you have another person who can maybe take your horse from you while you wait for that card, just to ease the process a little and help with crowding, that's wonderful. If it's just you, that's fine. Just be patient for that card to come back. Next up, your horse has to get to that vet. So your hold time does not begin until your horse has pulsed down and passed that vet check. So the first order of business, get that tack off, do whatever little tap dance you're going to do with your sponging, like Lonnie said. Very often, my Arabs will come in from a loop, we pull tack, and we go to the vet. It's rare that I spend much time putting any kind of water on before I go see a vet. That's just my method. It's how I condition. It's how I ride. I plan to bring them in cool enough that we walk right over to that vetting area. So as you do this longer, you'll learn what works best for you and your horse. After we've gone through the vet, now this is another key to having crew. Your legs feel like rubber after going up that mountain and right back down again. And the older we get, Laney keeps talking about nobody knows about all these things, but she doesn't realize how old all the rest of us are. However, younger crew members are wonderful for running back and forth with your horse and doing your trot out. I am a vertically challenged individual, so when I trot with a horse, it never shows the horse in its best light because I'm frantically running along beside of it. So I have long-legged teenagers who make my horses look fabulous. So if you ever see one of those in a crew area, always hit them up for some trot out time. They love it. Once my horse is back in the hold area, food. I once had someone ask me, how do you train your horses to eat at a hold? I put a bucket in front of them. My horses are pretty food motivated, so that's never been a challenge, but I did think about it. And at my conditioning rides, food is part of our program. Even if we do a little 6-8 mile thing, they get a 6 to 8 mile worthy snack, something, just, a little scoop of beet pulp, a little sprinkle of green on the top, maybe a couple apples in the bucket. But it's part of, we ride, we eat, we stand quietly while we eat. So that's something that we train them to do. And we expect them to focus on recharging while they're in that vet area. dancing around, wandering through the camp. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for anybody. So teaching them to relax is important. Now, one key to teaching them to relax is take a big old deep breath yourself. If you know that you are a nervous individual and that you stress about things, remember why you're here. You're here to have fun. If it's not fun, there's no point. So enjoy the day. Take a look around you while you're standing there. You're there in the wilderness with your horse, all these nutty people all around you who are laughing and having a good time. Relax.
Freeze.
There is nothing to stress about. So now that you've got your horse eating, this is that moment where they tell you on a plane, give the oxygen to yourself first before you give it to the person next to you. If you don't eat and drink, you are no good to your equine partner. You are worthless because your riding will begin to suffer and your ability to think will suffer. And if you can't make good decisions for you and your horse, you are no good to them. So make sure that you take care of yourself as well. Figure out what it is that makes you happy in a crew area. Do you like to have soda? Do you like to have chocolate? Do you like to have peanut butter and jelly? Or do you want to stick to your, whatever your healthy diet is? You'll see most endurance riders are pulling out a lot of potato chips and odd combinations of things in a hold. Enjoy what you want. You're doing a lot of work, and just eat whatever can stay down. While you are there with your horse, it's a good idea for either you or the people with you to go over the horse now. Now you've got it standing still. Now you take a sponge and you start wiping sand off the horse. Sand gets in all kinds of fun places, like their armpits and under the girth. So you want to get all that sand off, because think about having, hay in your bra. It's not a fun thing. So you want to make sure that all those little areas are smooth and clean, and you don't have issues and places to rub as you go back out on your next thing. If you do leg protection, make sure that's clean too, so that when you put it back on, you're not having grit rubbing all over your horse. This is when you start to find that maybe your horse dinged itself on a little rock here or there, and you can decide if you want to put anything on it or if you want to leave it leave it open, whatever your method of choice is. My teenagers love to go through a tube of Desitin at a ride, and my horse has polka dots all over it because they put boo-boo cream on everything they see. So the horses like to be pampered that way, and they enjoy it. We also will make sure that at that Bird Haven hold, if you are going on to Laurel Run, we now want to think about what you're going to need to have at that next hold. Diane is right. It's a full service hold. There is everything from soup to nuts. If you require something special, this is where you need to make sure that you carry it with you or that you've sent it with you. I like to carry some sort of snack that for my horses and a little pick-me-up for myself. Because I've never done the LD at this particular ride, but I have done the 55, and the climb up Falls Ridge to Laurel Run is super extra special fun. So a little snack motivation halfway up that climb is a nice thing to have for you and for your horse. So I carry a pocket full of peanuts, or I carry a pocket that has baby carrots in it, or something that my horses like. So when they stop halfway up and turn and look at me and ask if I have lost my ever-loving mind, I can hand them a carrot and say, thank you very much, keep going. So that's something that I carry with me. I do also pack and bring my electrolytes with me. I tend not to send a lot of things, or I actually don't pack and send anything to Laurel Run, because everything else that I need is there. So just those little special things. What I do is I have a box that is labeled with the rider's name. So if I'm riding with a group, which I tend to, each rider has some sort of a little plastic box that has things for me in it. My crew then can focus on the animal, and I can go sit in my chair and go through my box and pull out whether it's fresh pair of socks or whether it's a snack or whatever it might be. I can take care of myself while someone else is managing the horse. We also make sure that one person on our team, I told you I have a lot of people, is responsible for checking the time. So they'll sort of give us a warning, 15-minute warning when it's time to go out of that vet check. At that point, I'm either making my last trip to the Porta-John, because when you're hydrated, you tend to pee all day long, or we're starting to make sure that I have all the things on my saddle. So I've got all that done. And then at 10 minutes till, I know that if I start tacking up 10 minutes before my out time, I am able to have all of my tack on, and I am able to get on and get out in time. That's another thing to practice. How long does it take you to tack up and get out? Now, there's no rule that says if your out time is 12 o'clock that you have to leave at 12 o'clock. You don't get kicked out. You can hang out in the crew area all you want. However, the more time you spend out on trail, the better off your chances are of finishing on time for the event. So you do want to make sure that you're managing your hold times pretty well. So we get our 15-minute warning. I begin tacking up, 10-minute warning. And then at that 5-minute warning is when I'm heading toward the timer, foot in the saddle and out the gate. At that point, the crew is able to kind of take a deep breath and say, oh, thank goodness she's gone. We have a couple of hours where we don't have to look at her, and then off they go. If you want people to come back and help you, make sure that you are kind, make sure that you are thankful and appreciative, and make sure that you crew for somebody at some point. And you will know exactly how much hard work and patience they put into that effort, because crewing at times is more difficult than doing the event itself. They get a lot of gray hairs worrying about you coming and going. But I am always appreciative for the help that I get.
Okay, and now I'm sorry I disappeared. My computer decided the internet was unstable. So I moved back to my couch, and that's why I have a cat behind me, because that's just where the cat stays when I'm here. So he will be making appearances. So we've done the crewing, and now we're actually you're going to get some previews of the loops of the OD. And Diane will be talking about this.
I'm going to add to Terry a little bit. Terry is extremely spoiled. She does have a large crew, but she also gives them out to people when they don't have crew. Her crew has helped me at rides. Many of us do this without crew, so don't let it scare you if you're new into this sport and you're not bringing friends to help you, especially, at least I hope, at the Old Dominion, everybody jumps in and helps. As Terry said, her crew will be sitting there waiting, and if they see somebody come in that looks like they're struggling or they're trying to hold their horse and get their saddle off, they'll come over and ask, do you want help? And I think that's pretty true for most of the crew that are waiting. If you look friendly or you look desperate, and you're coming to this ride for the first time, I think you'll find that there'll be a lot of people there to help you. And like I said, at Birdhaven, we have probably 4 or 5 volunteers that are strictly there in the crewless rider area to help people. And they also watch out for you as you come off the trail. And if somebody doesn't greet you at the timer, they'll come over and say, do you need help? And just tell them what you need. So talking about our loops, and again, this is a unique ride because it is a point to point. Something that is unique to our ride, and most of the point-to-points, is something called a close time. When you come to the ride, if you are coming to our ride, you will get a sheet called a vet check schedule. And on it, it will tell you the latest time you can come into the hold, and you must be pulsed down by that time. So let's say you're doing the 55 and you come into Bird Haven. Nobody should get to Bird Haven before 8 o'clock. Even the front runners, if they get there before 8, they miss part of the trail. This has all been calculated out for years and years and years. The actual last pulse, you have to have your horse pulse down by 11:15. This has been figured out for years using timesheets from the past years and analyzing timesheets. Basically, what this is saying is if you're not pulsed down by 11:15, there's really no way you could finish this ride. These have been adjusted for this year because it is now a 55-mile ride, which I'll go over when I get to the Laurel Run part. So this would be very similar to what you would get in the ride briefing, but I'm not going to go into as much detail. But our first loop to Bird Haven is, and both the 25s and the 55s do this, is 15.7 miles. It starts out going out of camp. You climb up a pretty steady hill. You have to go by a turkey farm. So if you can practice going by someplace it's going to stink and makes a lot of noise, you go by a turkey farm right before you turn. But this loop has one big climb in it, up to the power line, or what they call the tower. And then you start working your way down. As Lonnie said, you're coming downhill into Bird Haven. It's hot pink and black. And as we said, all the ribbons are on the right. When you leave Bird Haven, and as we've said, it's required that you have to have four shoes or 4 boots, because the trail, the first loop isn't the rocky loop. The second loop, if you're on the 55 going to Laurel Run, is red and black checkers. And that is the loop with the huge climb. It goes up onto North Mountain, and it is a very long climb. And then it is an extremely rocky trail. Goes along the ridge, and then you come down a pretty steep downhill onto a fire road and into Laurel Run. So if you have done this ride before, the change to make it a 55-mile loop, and I believe Dawn is one of our participants, it was her brilliant idea. When you come into Laurel Run, we're actually going to point you down the road to go a 1/4 mile down the road, pick up something you're going to have to bring back to us. There'll be a water trough there, and then come back. By adding that 1/2 mile, it makes it a 55-mile ride, which gives the riders an hour and 15 extra to finish the ride. It's actually 52.5, but with ARC rules, if you're at 52.5, you can make it a 55. So, and again, we talked about Laurel Run. When you come in there, not only do we have all that food and everything, but we have an entire group of crew. That's all they are going to do. They're going to have on bright yellow volunteer shirts. When you come in, they will ask what you need. They will hold your horse for you so you can get your saddle off. They'll hold your horse for you to sponge them. They aren't there to hold your horse for the whole hold. What they will do once you head out and get your pulse and do your trot out, they will ask what you want, water, sandwich, and they will go get that while you are, so that when you come back, they have it, or they'll ask what grain you want for your horse. Something Terry was talking about as far as taking care of yourself and eating and drinking. A very important thing is this can be a very hot ride. You need to ride in the heat for yourself to get used to the heat. So many people will ride early in the morning to beat the heat, but then you're out there at noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in 99-degree weather. And if you haven't ridden and trained in 90-degree weather, neither you or your horse are going to be ready for that heat and humidity. Just a thought. Also, it'll help you learn how to eat in the heat. I'm horrible about eating in the heat. So you have to get used to it. So that's the 55s. Now they're coming out of Laurel Run. And the old saying with the Old Dominion is if you're on the 55, if you get through Laurel Run, it's all downhill from there. There is a couple of climbs, but it truly is downhill from there. And it's a breeze to get back into Bird Haven and then home. So I'm going to wait on the second loop of the LD till the end. So the 55 third loop going back into Bird Haven is 13.4 miles. When you leave Laurel Run, you do have a climb up the fire road. It's about 3 miles. It's just a steady up, 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 up. And it's like, when are we ever going to get to the top? When you get to the top, there are 2 huge water troughs at the top that we keep full all day. We have a water person that's all he does is goes around and fills the water troughs. And then you will go along a nice grassy wide area, and then you will make a turn and you will head truly down into Bird Haven for the whole second half of that loop. That loop is blue and white checkered, and the loop going home for the 55s is blue and white checkered. So for the 55s, after they get back into Bird Haven, and this is a traditional thing for the Old Dominion, that you go into Bird Haven, and then when you leave Bird Haven, you only have 6.5 miles home.
Uh-oh.
And there's no climbing, all flat, going through private property of Shrinemont to came out. Once you cross over a paved road, that is what we'll discuss the paved road. You're going to cross a paved road on your way into Bird Haven, on your way out of Bird Haven to go to Laurel Run, to get back into Bird Haven. We put sand down on that road to help with the slickness of the road. But any paved road, make sure you stop if you're coming to this ride and walk across the road and walk where we've put the sand down. It really helps with your traction. And we do that on any of the paved roads you have to cross. For the 25s, when you come into Bird Haven, you did that first loop the same as the 55s. But when you leave Bird Haven, you're heading home. But to make it a 25-mile loop, you have to do 9 miles. So what you do is we make yours, so there's no confusion, your last loop is black and yellow checkered. And you're going to head back the same way as the 55s, but at that 4-way intersection I told you about, you will turn and go up the hill. You're not going to go as far up the hill as you did on the first loop, but partway up that hill, you will make a left-hand turn and then come back down a power line, back down onto the trail. And that gives you your 9 miles. And then the rest of it's the same as the 55s, but you will follow yellow and black ribbons all the way back into camp. Again, all the ribbons are on the right. All the turns are marked with double, and a lot of them are marked with pie plates or large with the distance and the arrows on. Done.
Okay. I'm trying to check it out. Okay, now we're back to, now we're saying that our 2 riders, Mary and Emily, have finished the ride. They both completed, and now it's after the ride, and how do we take care of everybody? And Lonnie's going to talk about that again.
Yeah, so, and again, we always have to back up a little because we have all these thoughts as we're listening to this whole thing. Is after our first seminar or our first webinar, some people said, this sounds like not a good first ride. And we all jumped in and said, no. This is a great first ride because we're all there to help you. We want you to finish. And every ride has its challenges, so if you go to South Carolina and the ride is completely flat and completely sandy and it's 70 beautiful degrees, that's not always the easiest thing on the planet because you don't get the change of terrain. You don't get the up and the down and the walk here and the trot there and the canter there. So the Old Dominion for me is one of the easiest rides because the terrain's constantly changing. So you have to walk, and then you have to walk down the hill, and you have to trot up the hill, and you're constantly changing. So you're using all on your instead of just one little set of muscles. And so flat sandy rides are not necessarily easier than this one. So yes, it can be hot, but it's also true we have had 70-degree days and it's absolutely gorgeous. And sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't. But there's a lot of help and we do everything possible to make you successful on this ride. And it's definitely very, very doable. I mean, you can get help from a whole bunch of different sources, but this is not any more demanding than you can do. You can do this. It's not above your skill set, even if you've never done a ride. We can make it as easy as possible for you. So once you've completed the ride, and the things that you need to do is, problems can come up. Problems can happen on the ride that maybe are not obvious because your horse is enthusiastic and moving along and going with his friends and finishing the ride and all is good. I mean, the last time a few years ago, I did the Old Dominion 100 and we came into the we finished and I was high as a kite. I was so excited. But we came into the very first vet check, which was Bird Haven at 16 miles. And I noticed that he had whacked his leg on something hard enough to put a hole. He wore full interference boots and he had chopped a hole in his interference boot and put a chunk out of his leg, but he was sound. It wasn't sore. He was fine. And he went ahead and finished the whole 100 miles. And we were moving and it rained a lot that year. So there was a lot of moisture. And what happened is after the ride, he got a cellulitis where that wound was. And if I hadn't watched him, so he completes the ride the next morning and he's trotting back and forth and he's fine. And he gets home and the next day, his leg is swollen big because he had this rock or whatever attack him on the leg and cause his leg to swell up, and he got an infection just from the wound and all the moisture and things like that. So again, you don't want to just turn them out and say, bye-bye, you were awesome. You want to keep an eye on them, because also sometimes their electrolytes are out of balance. And so they may finish the ride and be okay, but once everything stabilizes and their fluid balance changes and they drink a bunch of water, then sometimes their calcium can drop. I mean, things can happen the day after the ride. So you don't just want to say, we're done, we're fine. I mean, that's one of the things is after the ride, we don't like you just throw your horse on your truck and drive away. Because if they're still pumped up and they're still on a high and they're still feeling good, it's when they let down that you can start seeing if there's anything going to happen. We need to know about it. If they feel kind of crampy because they've really burned through all their calcium, or if they feel kind of crampy because they're really dehydrated, there's no better place to be than at base camp when you've got 10 or 12 veterinarians who are endurance trained to help you. And so you don't want to be on the road heading back to Kentucky after the ride once you finish until your horse has had. This is why we really want you to stay for a few hours or overnight and let your horse rehydrate and relax and refuel, because if anything's going to happen, you've got a mess of veterinarians there who can say, you're okay, this is what you need to do, or actually, no, a little bit of fluids will really help you. Again, I was down in Florida this January, and my horse, who's competed for 15 years, he finished the ride, he was fine, but he was just a little bit punky, not doing great. And for the first time in his 15 years of competition, he had an 18-hour drive home. I said, you know what? I've never had to do this with this horse, but I'm not putting him on the trailer for 18 hours. So I had the treatment vet give him some fluids to rehydrate him, and he sprouted like a flower. I mean, he felt like $1 million. And when he came off the trailer 18 hours later, he was bucking and kicking, and he wouldn't have felt that way if I hadn't had the treatment vet give him fluid. So I'm so glad I did that. I've never done that in 15 years. And you can guarantee I will do that again if I think there's any reason why after the ride, he's not as good as he should be. But so once the ride is done, yes, your horse is done, but don't turn your back. You need to hydrate, you need to eat, you need to relax, you need to kick back and put your feet up, but just keep an eye on your friend and make sure that once he winds down, everything's as good as he should be. Sometimes they'll have just a little bit of a tweak, a little bit of a heat in their suspensory or something. And if you know that and cool it and take care of it, then he's good to go a week later. But if you don't take care of it, then sometimes it can come back to haunt you later. And so one of the things that we tend to do when we're new at this is we overtrain. There's too much riding going on. They need a lot of rest. Is that if you're training 2 or 3 days a week, they need the rest in between. And it is totally true. As a horse, it has been done that horses can compete every weekend of the year. There are horses who have done 5,000 miles in a year. We have rides that are multi-day rides. We have rides where you do 50 miles a day for 5 days, and the horses handle those just fine. So, but in general, what we say is that if you're going to do a 50, then, you know, just plan on turning your horse out for a couple weeks. I mean, let them run around. And what you'll notice is when they come off the trailer, they are hooligans. I mean, they are so glad to be home as they come backing off the trailer and they shoot off into the field and they're bucking around. But then you'll notice for the next couple of weeks as they're walking around the field, they're looking pretty, but they're walking around the field. And when their other friends start running, they'll like, yeah, have a good time. And they'll be grazing a little bit. And when you see them doing that Arab head twirl, you know they're ready to go back to work. When they start flinging their head, you're like, okay, honey, you're going back to work. But they really will just kind of chill for a couple weeks. And then they start trotting around and then they start doing that bucking and farting across the field. Then they're ready to go back to work. It's, you know, what it says here is it's not uncommon to give them a month off for 100 mile. And maybe that means that you don't ride them for a month. That's totally fine. Or that might mean you only might do some training rides with your friends on the weekend. That's totally fine too. So you can, of course, do 100 mile or once a month and be fine, but you don't have to. And if you're not going to, let them rest. They will last so much longer, because what our goal is here is to have a horse that competes for 10 years or 15 years. And we don't want a flash in the pan. You don't want a horse that wins a couple races and is never heard of again. You want a horse that's a partner of yours that 10 years later, you're still competing. And when they're 22, you drop them back to the limited distance rides and they're still with you because you took care of them after the ride. I mean, it's after the ride that really matters. So you do want to keep track of their gut sounds. You know, you're not going to see a whole lot of poop at first because they pooped it out all on the trail. And so they're empty and then they've got to fill it back up. You feed a lot of wet food. I mean, moisture, you've just got to get the food into them. So you need to train them at home before the ride to eat their hay wet. You need to try, I mean, put their hay, take a bucket full of water and take that flake of hay and submerge it in the hay, submerge it in the water and get them to eat the hay out of the water. They won't do that normally. I mean, they're like, that's gross. You just ruined my food. But teach them to do that. Teach them to eat the wet beet pulp. If you don't do wet beet pulp, teach them to eat wet alfalfa cubes. But everything they eat after a ride should be wet. They should eat wet grain. They should eat wet hay. They should eat wet everything because they're dry. They're parched, and you want to rehydrate them. So they're not going to do that normally. They're not going to think that's that cool. So train them at home to eat wet food. Some people do poultice. Some people.
Oh shoot! Is it me again?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Some people don't. But it's, I mean, everybody has a different system, and it's just making sure they're happy and listening and talking to you. And then again, when you get to camp, and one of the things that will be in your packet is what to do with your manure. I mean, it's, you want to leave, because if you leave your camp in a wreck, the person who's going to have to clean it up is the ride manager the next day. They want to go home. They're tired. They're exhausted. They're trying to get the results in. And I mean, I am absolutely serious is if you leave piles of hay out there, who's going to have to spread them so the grass isn't killed? The ride manager. And they're already got a migraine and they're already dehydrated because they didn't take care of themselves. So leave your spot. Of course, there's going to be dead spots. Of course, there's going to be places where the horses have tromped and things like that. But if the rule is to go, sometimes you'll have us collect the manure and pile it up against the road. And so somebody can come and clean it up and get it out of camp. Do that. I mean, just do that. And because otherwise you're talking Sunday morning, she's been working on this ride for a year. That's not what she wants to be doing, is cleaning up after 150 horses. I mean, that's just not the thing to do. So clean up your supplies, dump the water, spread the hay, and she'll let you know in the piece of paper when you get your ride packet how the site should be left. And again, once you get your horse home, throw it outside. And there's nothing better in the world than green grass. So if you can find any green grass, find as much, put your horse where the grass is. They can pretty much eat whatever they want for about a week, and then they got to go back on their regular diet. But let them rest, let them recover, and just sit there and count your blessings and rest on your laurels.
Okay. Go to the next one here. And you can do this. Everyone at the ride wants you and your horse to have a good time. This is me. I will say I'm in the pink on my horse, and I have that big grin on my face because my horse was happy and she took a big drink. And when you get and we all learn a lot. We all make new friends. It's a great learning experience. I love it for being the horse, but I also love it for my brain. Doing these webinars with these amazing panelists is wonderful. My brain, I'm learning so much. Register for that first ride. Maybe you start with an intro. Maybe you start with the LD. Maybe you are brave and go for the 55, but just register and do it. It's the smartest thing I ever did with my horses. And I hope that you all, if you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I can do this, just try it. Go for it at least once. You might surprise yourself. And now we're gonna go back to Diane, because we have a big call for volunteers at the OD. And this is a way to learn about what to do at a ride without being at the ride. And this is a way to meet people too.
Okay, as we said, it's the call for volunteers. I want to reiterate something Lonnie said, and that is about wanting to have your horse eat wet feed, wet hay, and practicing it before the ride. Any one of my horses that are in competition, every single day their feed is wet. They do not get fed dry feed, but that is so they're used to it and they'll eat it at the vet checks. So again, everything about the ride you want to practice ahead of time. And we don't want to scare people off. Don't think that this ride is too hard. I actually like it being the point to point, because once you leave base camp, you don't get back to base camp till the ride is over. That is actually what makes it a lot of fun, but in a lot of ways makes it easier, because when you're at a ride where you come back into the base camp, you got to get that horse to leave base camp again to go out on the next loop. And at this ride, you don't go back to base camp till you're finished. But if you are new to the sport and you're not quite sure you're ready to do the ride, which I think you all could come and we'll make sure you're successful, the best way to learn about endurance is to volunteer. And there are so many jobs. And for the Old Dominion, the June ride, it takes over 100 volunteers to put this ride on because it's a point to point. And those jobs can include scribing for a vet. And we have vets that are more than willing to answer all your questions and teach you about what they're looking for with the horse, what the concerns they see with the horse. You can learn a lot that way. You can come and volunteer and help crew for people, or help with the timing. There's so many different jobs. And that link at the very bottom of this on another page, if you click on that, that is a questionnaire, and it goes into a spreadsheet for my volunteer coordinator. And basically it's getting your contact information is the most important, but it has questions in it about what is your experience with endurance? What kind of jobs are you willing to do? And it helps us assign you so that you can have a good time and also learn while you're at it. But again, if you're anywhere close to doing a ride, sign up. Sign up. This is a great ride. And when Lonnie was talking about the manure, yes, you have to spread the manure. Our base camp's along a creek. You don't ever throw it in the tree line near the creek. And you haul your hay away, because otherwise it does kill our field. But that's a whole nother story.
Okay, now what I've done is set up a couple of pages of resources, direct links to ARC, Old Dominion, ECTRAs, all the ones that we're sanctioned with. Also the Ride and Tie organization that Lonnie was talking about. If you are interested in Ride and Tie, contact Lonnie. She knows a lot about that. I also have resources for green beans. So anyone who's new to endurance, more about learning about electrolytes, endurance inspection is a great blog. Patty Carey puts a web-based course about endurance, which I've participated in, and I think it's wonderful. It's something that you can actually learn more about endurance. Go and click on horselearningonline.com. And this was Patty, and I have a thank you for some people that I used their PowerPoint to get this started with this one. And now I'm putting back on question and answers, because I suspect there's going to be some. And again, I put the link for the volunteer there. I meant to put it in the other place, but it's good to have it in two spots to remind you that, yes, we want you to be a volunteer. Well, as we can open up for questions and answers.
Okay. I'm going to, Carolyn asked, one of the participants asked about starting with boots. And if I'm reading the question correctly, they want to start with boots, but if it doesn't work out, I typed in there that there's a farrier at every hold. The farrier's main job is to put shoes back on. But in the past, we did have a rider who started, and she was doing the 100. She started with all boots, and she had such trouble keeping the boots on. Her horse had just been recently trimmed, so the boots weren't fitting right, that she came in last to Birdhaven, and she actually did decide to have the back feet put shoes on it, because those were the boots she kept losing, and she left the boots on the front. So yes, the farrier can, but think about the time it takes to put 4 shoes on. If you were to change your mind partway through the ride, the farrier could do it. He charges per foot, and you have to pay before you leave camp. But that would probably take about an hour to get shoes on all 4 feet. So you're going to be behind by an hour as far as getting back out on trail. So I would say if you're planning on boots, make sure they fit well, use them at home on mountainous trails, use them on rocks, and make sure they fit really well. And the rider I'm referring to, her mistake was she had her horse's feet trimmed the week of the ride, so then the boots did not fit the same. So make sure that your foot growth is at that stage that they fit the best and will stay on.
Any more questions? I'm not looking at chat.
Carolyn, are there any other questions we should be answering?
No, there aren't. Somebody had asked about a mounting block, and I think Lonnie responded, there would always be something, whether a mounting block or a bucket or something to use at Birdhaven.
Birdhaven actually has a whole string of rocks right along the creek that a lot of people use to get on. As Terry said, quite a few people, if they have crew, will either have a step stool, and they're always willing to offer it to people to help. Laurel Run has several rocks and an embankment that you can get up on the embankment and the horse down on the road. We don't have well, actually my trailer will be up there. There will be a mounting block, a 2-step mounting block at Laurel Run. I'll leave it in my trailer.
I just had someone message me about unmuting callers. Unfortunately, everybody, I'm hoping that you can get through, because this is a Zoom webinar. We can't really unmute the participants, and you need to type the questions through question and answer. I believe that is correct.
And Diane, somebody asked, is it possible to do the 25-mile one day and volunteer for the next?
Definitely, that's what most of our people do. They ride one day, volunteer the other. If they go to that questionnaire, the questionnaire will actually, I think under Friday, it'll say, different jobs, or it'll say, and you just click that you're riding on Friday and you're offering your help on Saturday. It breaks it down day by day.
Okay, someone messaged me a question. She asked, for the 100, should we send a cooler for the morning and evening holds?
Send what?
Send a cooler, a horse cooler for the morning and evening holds.
There are not evening holds on the shorter distances, but there are evening holds if somebody's asking about the 100.
They are asking about the 100, yes.
Yes. If you're doing the 100, as the sun starts to go down, both you and your horse can get a little chill.
I was volunteering at Big 92, and a pop-up thunderstorm started, which dropped the temperature significantly, and there were many shivering horses, and I went and pulled all the horse blankets out of my trailer and threw them on horses I didn't know because of helping these 100. So yes, I would say bring blanket and if you have your coolers.
there's also one question. Is it better for your horse to volunteer the day before or the day after your ride?
Well, at this ride, well, one that really depends on your horse. Some people's horses will, like at No Frills, we have many volunteers that they come and they volunteer Friday and they ride Saturday, or they do the opposite. They ride Friday and then they volunteer Saturday. It really depends on the horse, whether the horse stays calm in camp on that day. If you have a horse that has a tendency to tie up, I recommend you ride the first day, because standing around in camp could lead to that tying up the next day. But at this ride, it really depends on the distance you're riding, because the 25 and the 55 are on Friday and the 100 is on Saturday. That will dictate which day you would volunteer. We don't have the shorter distances on Saturday. Saturday's ride is all focused on the 100, and Sonia, our host here, is our intro ride coordinator. So if you're, after this webinar, if you're leery about trying the 25, then sign up for the endurance or the intro ride with Sonia,
Please.
which is 15.5 miles.
And what is the start time for the 25?
Oh, Lordy B, you actually want me to go get the, okay, hold on, I got it.
Good question. This one, I'll be writing the 25 for anyone out there.
Start time is at 8 for the 25, and it is 6:30 for the 55. They're early to try to beat the heat. The 100 starts at 5:30 on Saturday.
And also, somebody asked if the webinar is being recorded. Yes, it is. And I think, will Sonia send out information about where it's posted?
I don't think we have fully worked out the logistics for that.
Well, Pam Stoneberger came on late, so she'd like to see she'd like the recording from the first part.
I've had a few people say that.
Yeah, this is Emily. I am looking at 2 ways to post it so that you can watch it streaming instead of having to download a massive recording file to your local machine. So give me a little bit, but once I have it out there, then yes, we will be sending the links to everyone who attended.
So you were mentioning that people, if they weren't sure about doing the 25, dropping back and doing the intro. If you've been training and your goal is the 25, this is a perfect place to start, because like Lonnie was saying, it reduces the amount of stress on you to determine how fast you should go on any one piece of trail. The trail tells you how fast you can go. So that part of the stress level is completely gone for you. The only thing you have to think about is, are you and your horse moving the way you should be moving on a piece of terrain? And it will all work itself out. Go for it. Don't hesitate. Take it one loop at a time.
And again, because you don't come back to base camp, it's a much easier ride to complete, because you don't have to fight getting your horse to go back out after the hold when they're right there at camp and they want to go back to the trailer.
Those are all the questions I see.
I have another question through someone from Messenger. She said that, Lonnie, you mentioned electrolytes have calcium. In your experience, does it have enough calcium without adding CMPK?
Every horse is different. Is for the average horse, yeah, depending on what brand of electrolyte you're using, and there are different forms of calcium which are absorbed differently by horses. So it does sort of depend on which electrolyte you're using. Some of my horses, for 20 years, they only use standard package electrolytes. Some of them we do use the additional, they need the additional CMPK. Most of those are the heavier horses, but not always. We do have one Arabian who is on fire when he gets his CMPK. If he gets a CMPK at every hold, and he's just a little regular Arabian, he can click through 100 like you've never seen. He can do it without it, but he is a different horse when he gets his calcium. So every horse is different, and you have to just keep track. If your gut sounds are good, if they're eating and drinking well and your gut sounds are good, your calcium is probably okay. If your horse is not eating well and your gut sounds are not good, you definitely need, I mean, it's, also if you're getting muscle tremors and things like that, yes, you need more calcium, but we mainly go by eating, appetite, and gut sounds. So, the average Arabian really can do fine with just standard electrolytes.
Okay.
Lonnie, do you want to
Yet
talk
another reason
the difference
to come to
between
a ride.
electrolytes you find at southern states like the apple bite or whatever versus the more potent electrolytes we use?
Yes, and you really need to, most of the electrolytes that you can buy off the shelf at Dover or whatever, all the local saddleries don't have the right levels of your sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium in them. Most of us, we go through different endurance ride providers. I mean, the ones you hear are Perform and Win and Enduramax, et cetera, et cetera. There's a million there. Okay, there's not a million. There's a few good, because the electrolytes you use for the Olympics, if you're an eventer, are different than the electrolytes you want to use as an endurance rider. So you're much better off if you go to Distance Depot or one of the distance riding suppliers, and don't waste your time with the local. If I cannot buy a locally available electrolyte that I would give to my horse. We'll just put it that way.
Thank you. There is a question here, a very good question, and that is, if you're volunteering Saturday for the 100, is there a way to differentiate the cavalry riders from those needing help from crew members? Sorry, my dog is barking at something outside. Little Tot. The cavalry riders will actually have a C beside their number. So very, very good question. Also, the cavalries all have their own special area at each of the holds. For those that are brand new to the sport, cavalry, sorry. Sorry. I might have to kick her up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My resident skunk, it must be on the porch. Anyway, for those that are brand new to the sport, Old Dominion has something very unique called cavalry. That means that rider is going to do the whole 100 with no help from anybody. Nobody can even hold their horse while they go to the bathroom. We have some very interesting pictures of people trying to get in the donjon while holding their horse's reins, and the horse doesn't like the donjon. But anyway, at each of the holds, they have a designated area. They have a designated bucket for them and their own water that is already assigned to them, and nobody can help them. But yes, you can see who they are because they will have a C on their horse's butt along with their number. And let me go get my dog now.
And then there are a couple more questions. If a horse will eat Tums, is that an acceptable way to add calcium? Lonnie?
Sorry, I was just actually, I have a ride and tie board meeting I need to go to. The answer is no. It's not an absorbable form of calcium, so it can't hurt at all, but it's not. What somebody was asking is that there's a calcium called CMPK, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium. And then there's a couple others, calcium, that you can just buy at Tractor Supply. You can buy them at Tractor. It's a liquid. Doesn't taste very good. It does not make them happy to squirt it in their mouth, but it's much more absorbable because there's different forms of calcium. And again, I can't remember which is calcium acetate and calcium carbonate, et cetera, et cetera. But Tums are not readily absorbed by the horses. So it can't give them the boost that they need.
I heard Lonnie say that she needs to go to another board meeting. Bless you, Lonnie. And we're already about a half an hour past what we had said we wanted to extend to. Unless we see any more questions, I guess we can call it an evening.
I do not see any more questions.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing this and just say thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate it. And we hope we see you at the OD. Okay.
Sorry, my dog
Bye.
kind of took over.
Oh, hello, little Tot.
I
I'm
thought
surprised-
Elizabeth would come up and grab her, but I guess she is.
I'm surprised my cat didn't like get excited.
Well, she might have actually been barking at Elizabeth out there because Elizabeth was going to muck. I have a horse on a dry lot and I didn't get the mucking done before the webinar.
Oh, how's little Todd doing these days? He's so cute.
He's still a little, can't figure out why Jackson's not around, but
That's
other
so
than that,
hard. Are you gonna get him a buddy?
I've been looking. There's hardly any in the shelters and stuff because I guess everyone
COVID.
COVID did
Yeah,
them.
yeah, people want the small dogs.
Oh, there's something.
Oh, Pam Stoneberger's not going to be there.
Oh,
She's not.
She says she's going to be out in California, then Colorado with her girls.
Okay.
So anyway,
It'd be hard having everybody spread out.
okay, the webinar made me
folks.
feel like a lot of
Good
stuff I haven't
job.
gotten done.
what?
I said the webinar made me realize things I haven't gotten done yet. I got to call the water supply guy to put in the hose for the water at Birdhaven.
All right.
Anyway, I'm gonna get off. Who's Melissa? We got
right.
somebody on the panel.
No, it's
Me, it's Melissa Linter.
Oh,
Oh, hi, Melissa.
I
Hi,
wanted to check it
Melissa.
out and see what you guys are all talking about and see if any, I don't know, just checking out all the info, you
I don't
know.
know which one I sent her. I thought who knows which one I ended up
sent
sending.
Well,
Melissa.
Linda Mulworth is still there, and Dave Franklin.
Yeah, I didn't know Dave was doing this until he sent me a text. I was like, what?
I sent it to the board
It's on
saying
the
if
scoop.
they
for
wanted to
ride.
join us, they could.
okay. I'm gonna get off because I got OD stuff to do.
Understand.
Yep. See
Thank
you
you,
guys.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
Hey, Sonia,
Yes, ma'am.
are you up to trying to do this in person?
I saw that email from you. I could probably do something, help you in person.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. I just need kind of a co-organizer. Like I said, I've got some ideas. I mean, what I would love to do is if some of the like really experienced writers come in to do muckle rats,
Right.
actually to get them to speak during the day.
Yep.
I emailed, Nick couldn't do it, unfortunately, he's on call.
Okay.
I emailed Amy Worrell about vetting the ride.
Okay.
I would love to get I don't know if Lonnie is interested in trying to come and do the ride, but I would love to get her to come and speak because it's nice to have a vet who's also a rider.
Right.
And I mean, she's so animated and,
Yeah.
you know, anyway, we can talk about more, but I feel like we really need to do like an in-person clinic in this area. In this geographic area.
Right. Right.
You know,
I
and
know.
Frank, I think this would be a great time and a great place.
No, I agree. I know that we're talking about in the fall doing another clinic, but we're not sure yet for OD. But
Well, I mean, it would be great. Again, I think Extra needs one.
oh yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, I
Extra-
just think, yeah, I think when I looked at the people who said they're not going to be there, to me, it said it makes more sense to do a one-day ride.
Yes, yes, yes. That makes
But
Yeah.
but the thing is, you know, when I called, in terms of renting the base camp, it doesn't matter if we have it for 2 days or 3 days. It's the same price.
right.
So that's why I thought this would be a good opportunity to try to do a clinic too. And, you know, people maybe could come to the clinic and do the CDR the next day.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
No, I think and I'd be glad to help you. I mean, doing it in person, I guess we have this, so we'll have some ideas of how to do it, but having the animals there and stuff, we'll just have to figure out how to organize it. I'm honored you asked me, Carolyn, because I know everyone keeps saying you have a lot of experience. I still feel so new in this sport.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I need someone to kind of bounce things off of. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I'm an administrator. I'm just hoping I don't get overwhelmed because Lindsay and I were going to do this, and she has another horse commitment. Like, she might actually come and do the ride Sunday, but she has another horse commitment because she's not going to be there through Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Mary Coleman is going to be listed as an official co-manager.
Okay.
And that is, and I told her I would do everything. I just needed, I feel like someone who has the reputation of managing a ride.
Yes, that makes sense.
You know, and she said she actually may ride it, which would be great.
That would be cool.
So, okay, as long as I got you on board now, we can work out the details later.
Yep.
I think I'm going to be bold and go ahead and create a Facebook page tonight. And obviously the word is getting around,
Yep.
but I want people to get it on their calendar because I've got to finish the paperwork and all this and that.
Mary said she got bored, so that's why she left today. That's okay. I hope it was a good thing. You've seen both of them. I hope that people like this one too.
Oh, I'm sure they did. I mean, I always learn something, you know, but sometimes sometimes I'm going to chime in because, you know, in terms of feeding, everybody has their own way of doing it. Like,
right.
You know, applesauce, in terms of electrolytes, applesauce, people use that.
Right.
And Claire uses carrot juice. Some people, molasses is an old standby. Some people actually use yogurt.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, everybody has their own concoction and you have to figure out what works for your horse.
Right.
You know, so like I said, it's interesting watching different people's strategies and you know, that's the bottom line. I don't care how many years, how many miles somebody has, especially if you get a new horse, it's just continuous learning, you know.
There's continuous learning always. I mean, there's always continuous learning. That's the thing. It really is. But
it is.
Well, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we did this clinic. It's interesting that a lot of the people that joined were like learners and stuff, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I didn't think my cat actually came out. She apparently when my absence makes her grow fonder because she was alone at home this weekend. Because she's not on any medication now, I'm not taking her to be boarded every time I'm away like my other cat. So she's actually coming out more. And I can pet her more without her like running under the bed.
Yeah.
Which is huge. Totally huge.
I don't know if we do. It says that we still have Linda and Lindsay participating. I'm not sure if they are not. If they are not, oh well.
Well, they may not have shut out their Zoom.
Exactly.
Yeah. We had well, I think I mentioned it last night. This afternoon we had the program manager for the Rosebud Sioux Horse Therapeutic Program speaking. And it was really good. We had, and you can always tell how long people stayed on. We had 113 people at that webinar.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really good. I'll try to find a way of apparently I've got to check my computer because I couldn't run it. I couldn't do Geo a little behind in terms of Zoom, so I couldn't run it in our virtual desktop, so I had to run it on my computer. Yeah, GAO has other platforms, but not Zoom. I use Zoom because that is what the program manager, and initially we were going to have the president of the tribe speak, but he had a last minute conflict. Anyway, yeah, it was pretty cool how they're using this program to really you know, administer a lot of mental health programs and yeah, anyway. Anyway, okay, I'm glad you're on board.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, thank you. And, start thinking about who would be good speakers. I might actually shoot Lonnie an email.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Like I said, it would be nice to actually have the vetting. And if Amy can do it, I'm hoping she can. Nancy Reed is next on my list.
Yeah,
She could just be a vet,
Yeah.
I mean, the vet judge.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, good job with everything.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn, thank you very much. I'm kind of tired, but thank you.
Well, go to bed early. You had a late night. All
I'm
right.
going to. I'm going to. All right.
Oh,
Good
it
night.
looks like Linda and Lindsay are gone now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm glad they enjoyed. Okay.
All right. Good
Bye.
night.